family heritage and our relationship to food, specifically the relationship we've had to the food that we've grown on our property and how we've prepared it.
Well, our family background is agriculture. My dad was raised up on a farm in Effingham County, and he would, I mean, if food was important to us, and the farmers raised a lot, even back then, would raise, especially back then, would raise their own food because cash money was not that available, and so he started out on a farm, was raised on a farm, and of course he instilled that in his children. We were all related to farming, and as a result of his farming experience, when the Depression hit in 1929, when the stock market collapsed, he had a good job firing a train from Savannah to Americus, but he lost his job. And of course, for about 6 months, he sold off property stuff that he had, a car that he had, but nobody had any money, so he couldn't get much for it. And so he moved back to the farm, realizing that we might survive better if we could get someplace where we can raise food. Because we had no cash money, so we couldn't buy food at markets and things like that. So he went back up to Effingham County where he was raised up, and went to the farmer that had sort of raised him and taught him how to farm. And that's where we all moved to eventually. And so for some 5 or 6 years we lived there on that farm, and he had gardens where he provided us with vegetables of all kinds. He had access to the Ogeechee River swamp, and he used wild game to feed us. Mm-hmm. And there were many opportunities. In fact, in all the years of that Depression, and it went on until the 38 and 9 and 40, it didn't really get over to any extent until the World War II. But during all that time, I was never hungry, and none of my brothers and sisters were ever hungry. My dad knew how to use the land to farm and to get wild game to feed us. We ate wild turkey, we ate squirrels, we ate wild hogs, and a deer occasionally. And that's our heritage, the Whaley heritage. And later on, he got enough money to save up and some stock and some implements, and he bought this little farm here in Bullitt County, and we moved here in 1938. All my brothers and sisters, all of us moved here. Then they began to move off because my brother George left, and then my sister Catherine got married, and we began to scatter. But even here, we did not have to shop for food in the stores. Most of it was raised right here on this farm.
Right.
I've seen 9 and 10 hogs hanging up in our backyard at the butchering time. And he raised the hogs, he processed them, smoked the meat, and that's what we ate. I've never been hungry, never.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about how the food, whether it be the game that we caught or the food that we planted. Tell me a little bit about how your family, whether it was you or your father or your mother, how they prepared the food and served it to the family. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my mother was an exceptional cook, and she knew how to make anything taste good. And whereas a lot of foods today are not, like broccoli and stuff like that, she could fix it where it didn't taste like broccoli. And she just knew how to prepare it, knew how to use seasonings and so on to do it. And it was vegetable based mostly. Meat, yes, because of what he could raise or kill out of the swamps. But that preparation was anything you do today: baking, broiling, cooking it on an open fire. There's a lot of barbecue done on a pit. and there was a lot of smoked meat, sausage, and things like that were made and smoked, and that preserved it. And we never had much beef because we had no way to preserve it.
Right.
But later on, though, as we got further along in the late 30s and the early 40s, he would take a milk cow and have it bred to a beef stock bull. And the calf then would become the source of our beef. And that's when they began to get freezer lockers and things like that where they could store them. Mm-hmm. You could rent this freezer locker and then go down there and get the meat as you needed it. And that was good too. And they canned beef more also. They canned it, and you could take a whole beef to a canning plant that was run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And you could go in there and can that whole beef in the cans. And it was a good way, and it tasted good too. It was very good. You didn't have to cook it. It was already cooked, going through the canning process. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of fried food, obviously. And chickens. My mother used to fry, not fry, but either grill, bake, and fry small spring chickens. She'd have a whole brooder full of them, and they'd get up about, maybe 1.5 pounds, and then she'd take them and cut them in half, and each child got a half a chicken.
That's good.
They found ways to do it without having to shop for it in the stores because it wasn't there. But you know what a supermarket was. You could go to the farmers markets and buy food sometimes, as my dad sold asparagus, but it was a lot different then. And the reason we did so well with it, though, was because of the good cooks we had. These women knew how to cook back then and enjoyed it. They knew that was their job, and they did it, and they were happy with it.
Yeah.
They enjoyed their cooking.
That's great, yeah. If you could tell me a little bit about how, from that time period to kind of up into my lifetime, so the last 20 years or so, what things have we as a family kept the tradition on, so to speak, in regards to food preparation?
Well, we all are overeaters. We love food. I mean, but the selections of food are so much better today than they used to be because of the marketing process and the supermarkets and things like that. And we seem to be able to maintain those, but there are special times, as they were in the older days, when people would get together, and it's primarily for a meal. Thanksgiving was always important. You might go hunting that morning, but you were there at lunchtime, ready for the Thanksgiving meal, and it was a delicacy. It was delicacy. It was good. It was special.
Right.
And that's when we did our visiting. We for a long time did not have an automobile, so we would go and all pile up in one car and go up to grandmother's at Portal. And that was always a wonderful thing. And we did it on Thanksgivings and Christmases and Easter and special days. And the meals were special, prepared, different somewhat from the daily meals that you ate. They were extra special. And as a result of that, the traditions of the family were kept together. There was more closeness between families. I mean, aunts and uncles and cousins and all just flocked together. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I've tried to carry that tradition on along with Jan, my wife, because we want that in our families too. So our special time is Christmas time, when we try to get together and have these special meals with a lot of extra things that we didn't have, that you don't have daily.
Right.
But that's getting more and more difficult, though, because our children are spreading out and getting their own lives, and that's bound to happen, and there's nothing wrong with it. But the meal traditions were what part of what kept families together. They'd have 2 or 3 days a year that they would have, or weekends or whatever, where they'd come together for a special meal with the whole family. Each one bringing something, or each one preparing something when they got there. And then out of all, and in addition to that, in the churches, there was always, everybody always looked forward to the dinner on the ground in the churches. Mm-hmm. That's when the wives and husbands both would fix special dishes and bring them to the church, and that afternoon after the service, they'd have a big spread. They called it dinner on the ground, but it was usually on picnic tables, and everybody joined in and bragged on everybody's food. Mm-hmm. And it was just a good thing. It was really a good thing to have.
That's great. Is there anything else you'd like to add, talk about, and related to food, the preparation or the growth of the food that we've had? Anything related to that at all?
Well, the process of producing the food in a garden, your own garden has a certain amount of makes you proud. Mm-hmm. That you're able to grow something. Plant a seed, watch it grow, and see it produce. Right. And that element exists in most of my family members. Frank loved it. I loved it. We all loved to plant a garden. We always liked to food with something. I've got peach trees back here. Now they hardly ever get a peach, although, because the squirrels get them, and the raccoons get them, and the deer get them. Mm-hmm. I don't get that many peaches, but I enjoy messing with those trees and making them produce a food. And the art of growing food, it's been lost to a large extent, but there's still old timers that still enjoy doing it, and I'm one of them. I like to have a garden. I'm worried right now because the grass is eating me up, and I hesitate to use chemicals, but I'm not going to be able to have a garden if I don't. Some of this grass was not here when we were younger. Mm-hmm. It's come in here from distribution of food stuff, food products, and there's a grass called Texas grass, and you can't even plant it and stuff. It'll smother everything out. And so I can't have a garden with that Texas grass, and it's eating me up out there. Yeah. And I'm going to have to let it lay out a year or two and keep it harrowed, and don't let the seeds come up. Spread, and just keep it for a couple of years and see if I can get rid of it, because I don't want to spray it. I don't like to spray stuff on food because that's dangerous, and especially you don't know what you're doing. I know how to grow something, but I don't know how to use those chemicals. You have to be a chemical engineer to be a farmer today. Is that any good at all?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of to wrap everything up, based on everything you've told me today, what do you think is the most important thing that people should know, anybody listening to this should know about our family heritage and the traditions we have related to food?
If we should have another shutdown like we had in 1929 and 30, I'm afraid we're going to have a difficult time producing food for our families. If we're not going to be able to buy it the way, if it's bad enough, we won't be able to go to the grocery stores and buy it. We won't have any money to buy it with if it happens as bad as it happened back then. Now, I'm praying that won't happen, but you never know what's in the future. But a person who has a little piece of land that's his, and with a little bit of ingenuity and know-how and the knowledge about food and planting food, can live without starving to death. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the most important thing in all of it. It's keeping that alive, because you don't know what the future might hold. And we hope we don't ever have a situation like the crash of '29 because it was terrible. And the people out that lived in the inner cities went back to the farms because out there